On my 50th birthday, they made me wear a crown that said King of Letdowns, and everyone laughed, everyone except me. Please stay with me as I tell you my story, and don't forget to support our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing this with people you care about. The harmless roast at a surprise birthday party turned into something else. Years of quiet disrespect rose up inside me like a tide I couldn't hold back. They had decorated the room with streamers and balloons, but all I could see was the crown. People clapped and cheered when it was placed on my head. Mason, my younger brother, slapped me on the back and said, "Finally, a title you deserve." My wife, Claire, snapped pictures with her phone, laughing along with the rest. My daughter, Sophie, hid her face behind her hands, though I could see her smiling too. I smiled for them. I even played along, pretending to bow like a king greeting his people. But inside, something was breaking. For years, I had worked quietly, paid the bills, fixed their problems, carried the weight so they didn't have to. I had done it without asking for thanks. But this was my reward, a joke that told the truth they believed about me. The night went on. Cake, drinks, small talk. I didn't say much, just nodded and let them enjoy themselves. No one noticed my silence. No one ever did. But in my mind, the decision was forming. When we got home, Claire sat on the couch, scrolling on her phone. Jasper, our old dog, lay at my feet. I went to the bedroom, opened my laptop, and searched for one-way tickets. I picked a small town in Oregon I'd never been to, somewhere far enough that no one would think to look. I booked it without hesitation. I packed quietly, a few clothes, my laptop, some books, Jasper's leash. I left my wallet and keys to the house on the table, along with a short note. "Don't worry about me. Take care of yourself." I didn't explain. By 3 a.m, I was on the road. The crown from the party sat in the passenger seat. Streetlights slipped by, rain tapping against the windshield. Jasper slept in the back. I didn't feel free. Not yet. But I felt lighter, as if the air had finally cleared after years of holding my breath. I knew they wouldn't understand why I left. Maybe they never would. But I understood. And that was enough to keep driving into the dark. I kept the engine off for a while, just sitting there in the quiet glow of the dashboard. Jasper shifted in the back seat, curling deeper into his blanket. Rain tapped a steady rhythm against the windshield, the kind of sound that doesn't rush you, just lets you breathe. I wasn't in a hurry. There was no one chasing me, no voice shouting from the doorway to come back. Just stillness. I had planned the route earlier, choosing smaller roads that curved away from the city. No highways, no easy way back. The streets were nearly empty, only the occasional delivery truck rumbling past. I eased the car forward, hands steady on the wheel, headlights slicing through the mist. With every mile, the weight on my chest felt a little lighter. The familiar street signs slipped behind me. I passed the gas station where Mason once called me in the middle of the night for cigarette money, the diner where Sophie refused to be seen with me and made me wait in the car for hours. I didn't speed by them. I took my time, letting each place fade in my mirrors until there was nothing but darkness behind me. On the kitchen counter back home sat the note I left. 4 short sentences. No anger, no explanations, no begging. It wasn't for them to understand, not tonight. I could picture Claire finding it in the morning, maybe laughing at first, thinking it was some kind of joke. Maybe she'd send me a text. "Where are you?" I wouldn't answer. Not yet. As the rain grew heavier, I reached the edge of town. A single pair of headlights followed me for a while before turning off onto another road. I rolled the window down an inch, breathing in the cold, wet air. It carried the smell of pine and damp earth, a scent I hadn't noticed in years. Soon, I'd be somewhere quieter. Somewhere where no one knew my name, and no one had a story about me to whisper. After about an hour, I pulled into a lonely rest stop. Just one flickering light over a vending machine, the rest swallowed by shadows. Jasper hopped out when I opened the door, stretching and shaking the rain from his coat before sniffing at the grass. I leaned against the car, watching him circle in the dim light. The air was cool on my face, and for the first time in years, there was no background hum of voices, no weight of expectation pressing down on me. I didn't think about where I'd sleep when I got to Oregon. I didn't think about who might be calling me in the morning. I just stood there, rain dripping from my jacket, watching Jasper explore like the world had suddenly gotten bigger for both of us. When he trotted back, I ruffled his fur and we climbed into the car again. I turned the key, pulled back onto the road, and let the night carry us farther away from everything that used to be mine. When I first drove into the small Oregon town, the road narrowed and dipped between rows of old brick buildings. Rain streaked the windshield, blurring the faded shop signs until they looked like pieces of an old photograph. Jasper sat in the passenger seat, nose pressed to the glass, his breath fogging up the window. The air here was heavy with rain, but clean in a way I hadn't felt in years. The studio I found was tucked above an antique shop at the end of Main Street. To get to it, I had to climb a narrow staircase with a loose railing. The landlord, Mrs. Bell, was in her 60s and had the kind of sharp eyes that noticed everything, but she didn't pry. She handed me the keys and said, "First of the month, cash or check," then went back to her crossword puzzle. Inside, the place was small enough that I could stand in the kitchen and touch the bed with my elbow. The window faced the street, giving me a view of the rainy sidewalks and the occasional person walking past with an umbrella. It wasn't much, but for the first time in decades, it was space that belonged entirely to me. Downstairs, the antique shop smelled faintly of cedar and brass polish. Reggie, the owner, was a wiry man with thick glasses and a stack of mystery novels by the register. He spoke in short phrases, morning, mail, need a bag, and never asked about my life before I arrived. I appreciated that more than I could explain. Most mornings, I took Jasper for long walks through the mist. The sidewalks shone under the street lamps, and the fog softened the edges of everything until the world felt quieter, gentler. People nodded when they passed, but they didn't stop to chat. I was a stranger here, and anonymity fit me like an old coat. In the evenings, I sat at the small desk by the window and began to write. Not about feelings, but about facts. Dates, amounts, receipts. Times I had covered Mason's bills, Sophie's tuition payments, Claire's emergencies. I dug through my email, screenshotting messages, printing them out at the shop on the corner. I kept them in a plain cardboard box under the bed, alongside old letters and IOUs that had long been forgotten by everyone. The crown from my birthday party rested on the corner of the desk. I didn't hide it, but I didn't stare at it either. It was just there, a reminder of the moment my life began tilting in a different direction. Some nights, I cooked simple meals. Other nights, I went to the diner 2 blocks away where the waitress always called me Han, without knowing my name. I started noticing small things, the sound of rain on the roof, the faint smell of bread from the bakery, the distant whistle of a train late at night. Here, no one asked where I'd been or why I came. The quiet was mine, and I intended to keep it that way. It started quietly, the way cracks spread through glass before anyone notices. Back at the house, life went on for a while without me. Claire still parked in the same spot in the driveway. Sophie still posted photos of her lattes. Mason still sent texts about catching up soon. But slowly, things shifted. The first real sign came 2 weeks after I left. Claire tried to pay the electricity bill and couldn't get into the account. I'd set it up years ago under my email, using a password I'd never shared. She called customer service, waited on hold for nearly an hour, and still got nowhere. The lights stayed on that month, but she had to drive to the utility office, stand in line, and pay in person. I imagine that felt like an inconvenience, but it was only the beginning. Mason's problem hit next. He'd been applying for a small business loan, something he'd been talking about for years but never quite managed to do. He needed my co-signature, though he never admitted that out loud. When the bank told him the application was denied, he sent me a short, annoyed message, "Need to talk. Call me." I didn't. Sophie's trouble was more immediate. Her car payment bounced, the bank tacking on fees. She had always assumed the money would be there when she needed it, because for years, it had been. She called Claire in a panic, and Claire tried to handle it, but without access to certain accounts, she could only cover part of it. The car company wasn't interested in excuses. Claire's frustration began leaking onto the internet. She posted a long, vague status about some people abandoning their responsibilities and how the truth will come out. Friends chimed in with sympathetic comments, many of them offering to be there if you need to talk. But not all the replies were warm. I didn't comment, didn't even like the post, but I read every word and every response. One man I hadn't spoken to in years wrote, "Funny, I remember Daniel covering for a lot of people." A former neighbor added, "Doesn't sound like the guy I knew." Their words weren't confrontational, but they chipped away at the clean, victim image Claire was trying to build. From the outside, I imagined the house beginning to feel heavier. The bills arriving in the mailbox like small, square reminders of how much I'd quietly managed. The repairs that I would have done myself now waiting for a professional they couldn't afford. The quiet panic of realizing how many things ran smoothly only because I made them. Mason's calls became more frequent, though still short and to the point. Sophie's texts started with practical questions. "Do you have the account number for it?" But eventually became softer, almost hesitant. I didn't reply to any of them yet. I wasn't ready to open that door. In town, my days went on as before. I walked Jasper. I worked on my files. I kept to myself. But I knew, even without being there, that the balance was shifting. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about watching what happened when the scaffolding I'd built for them disappeared, piece by piece. And from the way the cracks were spreading, I knew the real collapse hadn't even started. It was early evening when I saw her name in my inbox. I almost didn't open it. For weeks, her messages had been short, clipped, and mostly about money, account numbers, payment questions, things she could have figured out herself. But this one had a different subject line. I'm sorry. I sat there for a minute, staring at it. Jasper was asleep by the window, rain tapping against the glass in a slow, steady rhythm. I clicked it open. The email wasn't long, but it was different. Sophie didn't sound angry. She didn't ask for anything. She wrote about the last few weeks, how the house felt strange without me, how bills seemed to appear out of nowhere, how every little thing they took for granted now came with a price or a complication. She admitted she never understood how much I did for them. She said she had assumed those things just happened. There was a line in the middle that caught me off guard. I think I was part of the problem. It wasn't dramatic, just plain and quiet, which made it hit harder. She even mentioned the birthday party. She said she laughed because everyone else did, but looking back, she wasn't sure it was funny. I read it twice. A part of me wanted to hit reply right away, to tell her it meant something to hear that. But my fingers stayed still on. I started with the bank. One quiet Tuesday morning, I walked into the branch on the corner, the kind with fake plants in the windows and the faint smell of copier ink. The manager recognized me from when I first opened the accounts years ago, but he didn't ask questions. I signed a stack of forms, moving every joint account into my name alone, closing others completely. The process took less than an hour. Next came the utilities, insurance, and credit cards. Some companies made it easy, others tried to keep me on the line, asking if I was sure I wanted to remove another name. I was sure. By the end of the week, every automatic payment that had quietly flowed out of my accounts for years was gone. The mortgage took more work. I called my lawyer in town, a meticulous man named Howard who spoke like each word had been weighed before it left his mouth. He drew up the paperwork to halt my contributions and formally dispute Claire's claims on the property. His advice was simple: document everything and don't waver. From my desk above the antique shop, I watched the first ripples hit. The house payment missed its due date. The credit card bill showed up without my silent transfer covering it. The insurance company sent a letter demanding immediate action to keep the policy from lapsing. I didn't need anyone to tell me what was happening inside those walls. Claire had built a life that looked solid from the outside. The manicured lawn, the holiday photos, the constant stream of social invitations. But it all balanced on money that didn't come from her. Without it, the surface began to crack. The calls started soon after. At first, they came from numbers I recognized. Sophie Mason, even the home phone I hadn't heard ring in years. I let them go to voicemail. The messages ranged from clipped and businesslike. We need to talk about the mortgage, to sharp and defensive. You can't just walk away from your responsibilities. Then came the less direct signs. A neighbor posted online offering light yard work and snow shoveling for reasonable rates. And in the background of the photo, I could see the lawn at my old house starting to yellow. Mason stopped posting pictures of expensive dinners. Sophie's social media shifted from cheerful updates to vague complaints about people letting you down when you need them most. I kept working with Howard, sending him copies of receipts, bank statements, and every piece of correspondence I'd collected over the year. Each document was another piece of proof that the life they'd been living wasn't built by chance. It was built by me. And now, without my hands holding it steady, it was beginning to tilt. Not all at once, but slowly, like a structure losing its foundation. I didn't need to push any harder. Gravity was doing the rest. Howard's office was on the second floor of a squat brick building at the edge of town, the kind of place you could drive past a dozen times without noticing. Inside, it smelled faintly of paper and old coffee. The carpet was worn flat in the middle, and the only art on the walls were framed copies of legal certificates, all perfectly aligned. Howard himself sat behind a wide oak desk, glasses perched low on his nose as he read through a folder. He didn't rush when I spoke. Every few minutes, he'd lift his pen, jot something in a small leather notebook, and nod as if cataloging each detail. His questions weren't dramatic, just precise. Dates, amounts, names, and whether I had proof for each. It was the first time in months someone had listened without interrupting, and the first time in years someone had listened without doubting. When I slid the first box of documents onto his desk, he didn't open it right away. Instead, he asked how many more there were. I told him 3, all in storage at my apartment. He leaned back in his chair, folded his hands, and said, "We'll need them all." Over the next week, I brought the boxes in one by one. He didn't dump the contents onto the table. He unpacked them in small, neat piles. Every receipt was flattened, every letter smoothed out and clipped together. He marked the corner of each with a colored tab: green for financial, blue for personal, red for anything that could be legally significant. Watching him work was like watching someone rebuild a puzzle without the picture on the box. It wasn't just the big things he cared about. Yes, there were tax returns, mortgage statements, and tuition bills, but Howard gave the same attention to the smallest scraps. A receipt for Sophie's school play costume, an invoice for replacing the water heater, even the handwritten note Mason left when he borrowed money. One afternoon, I brought in a small paper bag with the crown from my birthday party. I placed it on his desk, half expecting him to laugh. He didn't. He turned it over slowly, then slipped it into a clear evidence bag without a word. Later, he explained, "Not everything is about numbers. Some things show intent, and some things show disrespect. That's both." We didn't talk about revenge. Howard wasn't interested in my feelings toward Claire, Mason, or Sophie. His focus was the case, building something so solid that not even the best argument could shake it. He spoke about establishing narrative, substantiating contributions, and removing ambiguity. It wasn't about shouting the truth. It was about making it impossible to ignore. By the third week, his desk was a map of my life in paper, colored tabs, labeled folders, neatly typed timeline. He'd call me in for short meetings, asking for clarification on a single date or payment. Every answer went straight into that leather notebook. The shift happened slowly, but I could feel it. On the day I first walked into his office, I was just another story about a man who left. But with every document, every receipt, every clipped-together proof of what I'd done, the story changed. It wasn't just my word against theirs anymore. And sitting there, watching Howard align the last stack of papers before closing the folder, I knew we were building something they wouldn't see coming. And once it landed, they wouldn't be able to escape. It was a little after noon when the knock came. Not the quick, polite tap of a neighbor dropping something off, but a slow, uneven rhythm, like the person on the other side wasn't sure if they should be there. Jasper lifted his head from the rug and gave one short bark before settling back down. I opened the door and there she was, hair pulled back, wearing a sweatshirt I didn't recognize, eyes darting between me and the floor. Sophie hadn't called, hadn't sent a message. She just stood there, holding the strap of her bag like it might keep her steady. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The rain had eased into a fine mist, and drops clung to her hair. She didn't look like the polished, smiling person I'd seen in so many online posts. She looked tired in a way I recognized, the kind of tired that seeps in when you're holding too much together. I stepped aside and she walked in slowly, her gaze drifting around the studio. I could tell she was taking in every detail, the worn desk by the window, the small stove, the stack of books on the shelf. This wasn't the life she'd imagined me living. She set her bag down and kept her hands in her pockets. "It's different," she said quietly, as if afraid of saying the wrong thing. I didn't offer coffee or ask if she was hungry. I waited. The words came in starts and stops. She told me about the past few weeks. The thermostat turned down low to save money, arguments between Claire and Mason that went on late into the night, the way unopened envelopes piled up on the kitchen counter. She admitted she'd never thought about how those things got handled before. Every now and then, she glanced at me, maybe expecting a nod or a comment. I stayed quiet. There was a pause before she spoke again, her voice lower this time. "I think I made it worse," she said, eyes fixed on the floor. "I used to roll my eyes when you talked about bills or work. I didn't get it. I didn't want to." Her hands came out of her pockets then, fingers fidgeting with the hem of her sweatshirt. "I get it now," she added, almost like it hurt to say it. I could feel her waiting for me to step in, to tell her it was okay, that I understood. Instead, I let the silence stretch. After a while, she picked up her bag. "I'm not asking you to forgive me right now," she said, meeting my eyes for the first time. I want to fix things. I want to earn it." I opened the door, and she stepped out into the mist. She didn't hug me, and I didn't offer. She just gave a small nod before heading down the stairs. I watched her cross the street, the shape of her disappearing into the gray. When I closed the door, the room was as quiet as before, but something in the air felt different, like a door had opened that neither of us was ready to walk through yet. The building had the kind of quiet that made you lower your voice without thinking. The air was cool, and the walls seemed to swallow up sound. Footsteps echoed against the polished floor, and every time someone spoke above a murmur, the security guard by the entrance lifted his head. Howard and I sat at a small table near the front, our folders arranged in perfect order. He didn't tap his fingers, shift in his seat, or glance around. He simply waited, eyes steady, the picture of calm. I'd learned that Howard's stillness meant confidence. Claire arrived a few minutes later with her lawyer, moving quickly, almost in sync. She didn't look my way, though her stiff shoulders told me she was aware of my eyes on her. Mason came in behind them, wearing a suit a size too big, his gaze sweeping the room like he was searching for an escape. When the judge stepped in, everyone rose and then sat again in one smooth motion. The formality had weight to it, like we were stepping into a story that had been written long before today. Claire's lawyer spoke first. Her tone was smooth and measured, but the words had edges. She told a tale of loyalty, sacrifice, and sudden abandonment. It was the kind of picture that might have been convincing, if there hadn't been another version of the truth ready to be laid out. When Howard's turn came, He didn't raise his voice or hurry his words. He opened one folder at a time, sliding each page into view. Numbers, payments, records, all precise. The only sounds were the soft shuffle of paper and Howard's steady tone. At one moment, he reached for a clear evidence bag and held it up. Inside was the crown. He didn't explain it, didn't try to dress it up. He simply let the judge take it in before placing it down beside the document, as carefully as if it were just another piece of proof. From where I sat, I saw the judge's expression shift. The neat stack of evidence wasn't just telling a story, it was undoing the one Claire's side had tried to weave. This wasn't about a man who ran away. It was about the quiet load he'd been carrying while others believed it would hold itself up. When it ended, the judge's voice was clear and decisive. Howard's case stood on solid ground, and the ruling landed in our favor on every count that mattered. We gathered our things and stepped outside. The air felt warmer than it had when we'd walked in. Howard didn't speak, and I didn't either. We didn't need to. The rain had eased into a fine mist, the kind that hangs in the air without falling. I sat at the workbench by the window, the faint hum of a soldering iron filling the room. A half-fixed radio lay open in front of me, its wires spread like veins, and Jasper dozed on the worn rug at my feet. Life had become quiet, almost weightless. No sudden demands, no unspoken debts. Just the slow rhythm of days I chose for myself. Sophie's calls had started weeks ago, short at first, then longer. We didn't talk about the past much. Instead, we drifted into conversations about books she was reading, strange customers she met at work, or the ridiculous things her neighbor's dog had done. There was a hesitance in her voice at the start of every call, like she was still waiting to ask for something. But the ask never came. That evening, a knock came at the door. When I opened it, Sophie stood there with a paper bag in her hands, her hair damp from the drizzle. She smiled in a way I hadn't seen in years, small, unsure, but real. "I made you something," she said, stepping inside without waiting for me to invite her. The bag was warm, and when she set it on the counter, the smell of cinnamon and baked peaches filled the room. We sat at the small table, plates between us, the cobbler still steaming. She didn't eat right away, just traced the edge of her fork along the crust. "You know," she said, "I think I'm only just meeting you now. The real you." I didn't answer. She looked up, searching my face, maybe for the anger she expected or the bitterness she feared. Instead, I poured us both coffee and waited. She talked then slowly about the house, how cold it felt without me there, not just in temperature but in the way no one seemed to know what to do. How she realized she had joined the chorus without ever asking what my side of the song was. There was no plea for forgiveness, no rehearsed speech. Just words that had been sitting inside her for too long. When the plates were empty and the coffee gone, she finally asked, "Do you think you'll ever move back?" I looked around the room, the shelves stacked with old circuit boards, the soft creak of the floor under Jasper shifting in his sleep, the faint sound of rain on the roof. "No," I said, shaking my head. "I'm already home." Sophie didn't try to change my mind. She just nodded, a quiet understanding passing between us. And for the first time in years, I felt it, not belonging to a place or a role or an expectation, but to myself. So, what do you think? Was I right to stay here in Oregon and build a life on my own terms? Or should I have gone back and tried to fit into the world I left behind? I'd really like to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more stories like this, don't forget to subscribe, tap the like button, and turn on the notification bell so you'll always know when the next one's up.